we are going over programming today. I know in some of the days that I haven't been in, Paul's gone over some programming stuff as a whole. So what I'm gonna do is basically going over decided to put all this stuff together for overall programming. But so in this, aside from any specific questions you guys might have, there is nothing in here about actually writing the workout. This is all a structure of basically of a how to do it, what to make sure you're recovering. So this isn't about exercises, etc. This is all about, and it's not even about phases, so to speak, but this is all about basically building somebody from the ground up or where they're at. So the main thing is especially with clients we work, but in general, if we're working with an athlete, so this is programming for performance. I need to say that kind of out starting off first, because it would be a little bit different. It would still follow the same rules, so to speak, but it would be different how you might prioritize certain things if we're programming for, say, aesthetics, bodybuilding, lose weight, etc., or for quote unquote general health. It's a lot would follow the same progressions here, but just some stuff wouldn't be as important or needed. So if we're programming for performance, we do want to make sure that we're looking at what they actually need to do to perform at their best in whatever it is they're performing. And so a lot of that happens in here when we're talking to the clients, when we're talking to the parents, when we're looking at their charts to see what they wrote down as their goals, stuff like that. So that's a lot of it. But that being said, we're, as the actual experts and coaches, we want to make sure that we're not only going by what they say, we actually understand what they need and make sure that they're working towards those things as well. So when we do that, we want to make sure that we analyze the sport. So everything that it needs in terms of, is it a high impact sport? Is there a lot of explosive burst in the sport? Do they need to have a high level of strength to play the sport? Is it more of strictly speed with very little strength necessarily needed? Is there a lot of endurance in this sport? There's a lot that goes with it. And we'll go into that in a lot of detail later. But examples would be say, as when you're playing baseball, at the end of the day, baseball players, they basically work with either a 5-ounce ball or something. I can't remember how much it actually weighs, but it's they're either working with roughly a 5-ounce ball or a 35 to 40 ounce bat, and that is their sport, something like that. So the strength levels that they need, for example, aren't necessarily anything where they actually need to move against a high resistance, but it's about how much they can, how well can they transfer how strong they are through very, very, very high velocity and accelerations of very light objects to then transmit that power. Like I said, it blows my mind when you still get a lot of traditional baseball people, for example, who are oh, strength doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. Then why did the steroid era even happen? Why did people care if people took steroids if it didn't matter? Why are they keeping Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Roger Clemens out of the Hall of Fame if steroids don't matter? It's because it's because the strength totally matters in doing that. And the key, and this is one of those things that makes good programming for performance so important, is because it's very easy to train to be stronger, but then never actually train to use that to be better at your sport. It's everybody who ever played a sport knows people who were super strong, but could just never seem to show it on the field or on the court. And it's because they never had something that actually helped them transfer it to their performance. So we'll go in that side deeper later for specific sports. So we want to analyze the sport, but then also analyze the position. Baseball is the example again. A pitcher has different qualities necessary than a field player, and a catcher has kind of more specialized qualities as well because of what they have to do. So you have really 3 different major profiles in the sport of baseball. In soccer, generally speaking, your field players are all close to the same, but your goalkeeper has completely different set of physical things that they need to do. And depending on the style, your forwards or like your forwards in soccer may have pretty different needs than the defenders as well. Like defenders are normally expected to be bigger / stronger. Forwards are normally expected to focus more on being faster and being able to change direction better. So there's semantics that go in it with positions. Again, football, you have your lineman, you have your quarterback, your kicker, you have your skill, like quote unquote skill guys, like receivers, cornerbacks. So it's never just a sport. You always want to analyze, ideally want to then analyze the position as well. And then one that's forgotten a lot of times is you also want to, if possible, analyze the playing style. So this one in a way is a lot of times just asking, what type of ball they play, what is the coaching style. The first two are by far the most important, because that's one we can get for everybody. The playing style would be definitely like a third on the run. But a big example here would be like using like football, for example. You have your high tempo like teams that don't take a lot of time on the clock. They don't go into huddles very often. They want to try to get the play, get set up, and call the next play pretty quickly. Stuff like that. Like they play around the idea of trying to like make it happen quickly in a lot of ways, like either not letting the other team get prepared, tiring them out, etc. Like they play with the style to be more conditioned than the other team. Whereas a lot of your more classically like trained or classically coached football teams, for example, teams with like 340-pound linemen, stuff like that, like maybe run it down your throat type football types, or just high passing, whatever it might be. Who knows? So it's not even about like the passing or the running, but they might be a lot more the like, we're gonna take time, we're gonna do huddles, we're just gonna try to like overpower you every single play or whatever it may be. So that's an example. Soccer is another example. Like you see this all the time. Like here at WVU women's soccer, it's a very, very, very high fitness, defensive oriented team, like with women's soccer. Like the women's soccer coach here wants even her forwards to play defense. Like a lot of teams, the forwards don't have to do that. It's like if you don't have the ball, you can literally stand there for a lot of teams care. So different playing styles can mean different conditioning needs to be met in these things. So make sure you have those. Now that being said, so those things, the sport analysis, the sport needs, the position needs, and the playing style needs, those are the end markers of where we want the athlete to be. So that's like meaning when they're actually playing their sport, when they're getting ready to go into the season, that's what we want them to ideally be good at. But that is not where we start, like training with them. Really the only time we do start with them that way is if they're already a more developed athlete, and they come to us, they're already pretty close to their season. So, so if they're like a later high school player, their main thing is, hey, like I got 1 or 2 seasons left to make an impression, to just get a lot out of my high school career, or make an impression on college coaches. And season starts in 3 months. With those people, like, okay, we're gonna just take where you're at right now and start working towards these things now. But anybody who's not developed, or even just younger, we would not, even in those situations, it would probably be better to actually work on their foundation and start building them upwards that way. And just the fact that like we're helping them become better trained and develop better will make them better at their sport, even if they haven't actually hit the actual needs of their sport yet. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like basically the younger, less developed they are, the fact that they're getting stronger at all, faster at all, etc. through foundation training will help them do better at their sport without having done like the true sport specific analysis training yet. So we're looking at those athletes. So most of them in general, most people we train with performance. It's actually like, so what are we building up then? So the first thing is making sure we're like getting their joints healthy enough for training, healthy joints and proper movement. This is, with our assessment that we run, we get to see where their needs are in terms of movement already. Like what's tightness, what do they need help with? posture, tight hamstrings, etc., all that stuff. And this is also why so many of the clients, we take them through, some version of AA, anatomical adaptation. Like I said, because our goal is just to start getting their joints ready for training room. But I say if they're not developed, this also helps, this serves as introductory foundation workouts. Like the less developed you are, the more any type of training done properly actually helps start getting you fitter and better, done correctly. And by doing it this way, just focusing on things like joints and movement first, we're actually doing it the way the body best responds to, by helping it get a foundation, rather than putting them just into an intense workout, which has a much higher burnout rate, early injury rate, stuff like that. So that's why you see, so many people come in, do an assessment, and their first month is different variations of 2 sets of 12, 2 sets of 15, even 2 sets of 20, working down, stuff like that. So they do that because it's also a great time to work, the joints, and then also a great time to work on technique with that proper movement. So from there, then there's kind of 2 different areas we want to go to. It just depends on what the athlete needs more. But sufficient endurance and sufficient muscle mass. I'm going to get through these more in depth in a little bit. So sufficient endurance, once we've built that up, now that doesn't mean straight cardio. If they're an endurance athlete, I hope that they're doing that. That's not really in a sense what they're coming here. If we are actually in charge of everything, then yes, if they're an endurance athlete, they would need some actual more traditional cardio of some sort. But we're helping them get sufficient endurance, again, with that more volume training in their muscles, the GPP work, the all-around work that just works their whole body as a whole. So sticking on that line, we would go from sufficient endurance to speed. And I mean the actions of the endurance to speed. So if we're talking running, they can run faster. It's pretty basic as far as that goes. Moving on back on the muscle mass line, we want to go from sufficient muscle mass to then helping them build strength, because in essence we're then teaching the muscle mass they have and any muscle mass they may have gained in that previous phase to now be able to exert more force to be stronger. From strength, we eventually want to start developing more power, which is strength and acceleration combined to develop higher levels of speed and power. So again, this all actually hits logically, because we had get the joints ready, then start seeing if we can help them get some more muscle mass to make them a better unit of productivity or performance. Then with that muscle mass that they have / improved, and then we're going to try to make that stronger so you get more force. And now that we get more force out of it, we're going to try to get more acceleration and more speed out of your greater force, so that it is now a much higher multiplication of power effect. Using a squat as an example, let's just take a completely generic example. Let's say this athlete in a running sport comes to us with approximately 100 pounds of muscle mass. And that 100 pounds of muscle mass has this is super simplified, but math nerd version of this. This athlete has 100 pounds of muscle mass, and with their 100 pounds of muscle mass, they can exert 1 pound of force per muscle mass. So they have a 100-pound squat, for example. That 100-pound squat helps this particular athlete run, let's say, 15 miles an hour. So if we take this athlete and then help their 100 pounds of muscle mass become 105 pounds of muscle mass, then at 1 pound, basically with enough force that would take the 100-pound squat to 105 pretty automatically if he maintained the same force output for his muscle mass. But if we then teach that 105-pound muscle mass to instead of a 1-to-1 ratio, suddenly be 1.1, just a little bit stronger per pound of muscle mass, that 100 to 105-pound squat may actually now become a 115, 120-pound squat, because he's now learned how to use it, become stronger. And then that higher squat helps him, if like then by then turning that into power training would help him turn his 15-mile-an-hour run to maybe like a 17, 18-mile-an-hour run. Like I said, it's completely made up numbers, but just trying to give an example of how it moves from muscle mass to force to accelerated power to performance, like in that general direction. And after power, to finish kind of just that super overall performance, we would want to go to then performance condition, which is the ability to actually do performance explosively or an appropriate level of explosiveness, how you're supposed to do it a whole bunch of times. It doesn't matter how well you play soccer, it doesn't matter how hard you throw a fastball, if you can only do it for like 13 pitches or 1 inning or 7 minutes on the soccer field and you're gassed. Like none of those things matter in those situations. Football player that is done after 1.5 quarters of snaps and then they're worthless. So, okay. So now the much more in the weeds. So those are the summary ways to cover it. The much more in the weeds, more detailed ways of how do we actually do this better. Okay. So this is the actual, basically, in programming, this is the checklist that I'm gradually working my athletes through. So basically I'm taking the overall performance chart and just going much more in detail with it. So first thing, as I said, we hit the assessment. We do AA type work with almost everybody because we're trying to get their tendons ready through high volume first. So we're again, because that also means it's lighter, that means it's easier. But that most early strength training injuries, or just a lot of injuries in general, like pulls, etc., strains, are tendon injuries. Or just the muscles not used to the force. So again, a pull is a tear. People forget that. It's not a bad one, if it's a slight pull, it's a small tear, whatever, but it's still a tear. So high volume first to get the tendons and the muscles ready. And this is also a great time to work on improving technique. So it makes the anatomical adaptation workouts, again, fantastic to do technique exercises, work on squats, work on, early hang clean technique stuff where we're at, the pulls, you name it like that. Okay, from there, we want to start going from there to start working on a more moderate strength endurance, which also happens to be the type of training that does help improve muscle mass. Now, how much of that they actually gain is a lot of how high the total effort of that workout is, how much are they eating, stuff like that. So just because we're doing moderate strength endurance doesn't mean they actually have to gain muscle or gain weight, but it is a type that's going to normally improve that overall setting of their body. So we started tendons through high volume and technique. Move after that, when we feel they're ready, to more moderate strength endurance. Now, what does that actually include? We're looking at muscular control, which is a great way to start using tempos and slower eccentrics. Slower eccentrics are also when the tendons are going through the most. So that's one big reason that we do a lot of slow eccentric work with people in general at the start of every big training phase or when they start, because it helps build that control. Literally more time through the actual movement helps them build those grooves out. So again, muscular control and slow eccentrics, and also total volume with, in this case, a preference more towards reps. 2 sets of 12 and 5 sets of 5 are only 1 rep apart in total. But right now we're not looking at, again, intense heavy training yet. So that's what I mean by higher volume, but preference on the reps to get started. The higher volume and the more tempo work, for example, also gives us more time under tension. So literally the time that the muscles and tendons and everything are under the load. And that, again, one, helps with technique. Because if 12 reps takes you 48, 50 seconds, if you do them at a tempo, and you could have knocked it out in 15 seconds normally, your technique from the 50 seconds should actually be better. Like especially if you're a less developed athlete and you're working on technique. If you just took 50 seconds to work on it, that's a lot more practice you're literally getting. Like a lot of times people forget that when they're strength training, either early on or if you've done it for a while, that it is practice. So it gives you that. So time under tension, which also helps more time for the muscle fibers to put in work, which is more growth stimulus that they go to once you hit recovery, which is the other part is then this will you start getting more muscular breakdown, healthy muscular breakdown, and then the recovery is a big part of getting better at this and where the muscle mass will actually come from. Okay, so this and the next phase, or the next area, are also great places to, if you know them, insert weak point training. I don't normally do that in the very first phase. Like I said, we're just doing tendon stuff, AA, but either if it's because it's somebody we've actually worked with for a while and they're just starting kind of like a new full training cycle, and we know weak points we've seen that we want to work on, great time. Or somebody who comes in with an injury or something, already knows a weak point that they're able to tell us, then a great time to start making sure we do some specific work for it here when it's not like about intensity too much. Okay, from there is when we kind of want to start getting to, again, train that greater mass, train that greater strength endurance to start producing more force. So we start looking at the strength levels. And we do this initially by really trying to get the body to recruit more muscle fibers. So this is when we're looking at lower reps, but this is still the higher low rep range. So this would be 5 to 8 reps, things like that. So it's still got to repeat it, but it's heavy enough to where it's more about force. So we're looking at lower reps and moderate to higher sets because we still want to have that total volume. So 2 sets of 12, 2 sets of 15, 3 sets of 10 have now become 3 sets of 8, 4 sets of 8, 4 sets of 6, or just various combinations of that type of thing. In this, we do want to, now that we're actually focusing on strength and force, we do want to, most of the time, spare the CNS. We want to spare the central nervous system, minimize failure, and also using regular deloads, and having good rest intervals between their appropriate sets, stuff like that. And again, a lot of people miss this. A lot of people, as soon as they go, even if they're not supposed to go heavy yet, if you don't watch them close enough, some will go heavy. This is huge in high school weight rooms. It's hey guys, we're going we're working to a 10 rep max, and then they fail on rep 3. It's which we've seen. It's so to make sure we're minimizing failure, because once that tiny nudge of your nervous system into failure cuts the adaptation that you make in your recovery time way worse. It substantially adds how much time you need to recover from an effort if you actually push yourself to failure through your nervous system, which is basically muscular failure. Let's see. Then so this is also a good time to, if we want to, think about other ways we can emphasize the training we're doing, and prime the muscles that we're going to focus on with activating warm-ups. So that's where the specific warm-up exercises come in. Great time to include injury prevention work if it's they'll cross off the 2 different boxes. Lighter explosive work like the plyos, or starting speed and agility type stuff. Ramping sets or warm-up sets. A lot of times people think, I feel if their first work set is a manageable weight, they want to go right into it without thinking about okay, you could go into it, but also you can still do a warm-up set that will wake up your muscle fibers in your nervous system even more for that action, which will then make your actual first set better. And then the set after that will be better. The set after that will be better. We don't use percentages a whole lot in here. I don't very often, but as a rule of thumb for me, kind of anything greater than 65% of a 1 rep max, I would have somebody do a warm-up set first anyway. Like even if it's just 70. So that's just the general ballpark. And then, and another way to do it is even sets or exercises in general. Even in the actual sets, we can also, again, another way that we can really focus on getting good strength contractions, good strength work, is by activating the stronger contractions early in the set. So like squat, where, you know, the very first rep is tempo, or the very first set, or the very first rep or first set is pause, but then that's it. Like, you know, okay, cool, we're doing 1 pause squat followed by 5 normal squats, something like that. It's a way of, like, it's really a way of, like establishing control over the weight. Like if you start off with a pause one and, you know, a solid, you crushed it, your normal reps are going to be fine and even better. I said the fact that it also helps is, like I said, like if you do a tempo with it, get your like, so when we think of when the actual rep, the concentric part of the rep, when the muscle's moving concentrically, that is actually the weakest of all 3. Like the eccentric, when it's resisting the motion and stretching, is the strongest, and the isometric, when it's just holding an angle, that's supposed to be the second strongest. So by doing something like a tempo, like I say, even if it's just for like 1 rep, or a pause for just 1 rep, that's one tool you have as a way to basically use the 2 strongest contractions first. Again, like really get them rolling, and then the rest of the set could be a way to do that, to go. And again, especially when you're working with like, again, just whether it's athletes who need a nudge and something different, or a lot of times it's again newer people, you really want to make sure that they're really focusing on controlling what they're doing and doing things right. It's a really good tactic. Like that's what I had Carly do when she started with squats, for example. Was she started, when she finally got the squats, we started with pause squats. And then after that, when she started getting into normal squats, she still was doing the very first rep of every set with the pause. Again, so that she had complete control, everything was ready to go and primed up. She'd hit that first rep and she was good to go for the normal speed reps. Anything so far? I tend to just keep going and talking. So, and I still have lots of notes. So cool. So once we basically worked on that for a while, worked on that, we want to start training for more near maximum force. So here's the thing. So even though in this list, this is the 4th thing, we had tendons through high volume, moderate strength endurance, and then start training to produce more force and recruit more. Training near max force is the 4th principle we've talked about. This is actually the foundational quality. So your maximum strength, more than anything else your body can do, will affect everything else that it does when it comes to performance. This, like all other things basically being equal, the stronger you are will make things easier. It will even make cardio easier because all of a sudden it doesn't take as much energy to do a certain motion. It will make being faster easier because now you can either move yourself further, or it should be easier again to move yourself. It's easier to move at one force at a higher speed, or maintain a speed but just produce more force the stronger you are. Like I said, so max strength is something that we always want to just over the long term really keep building and not let it go down. Because it really will be that foundational quality. In some ways it can do that. The biggest thing is, of course, at this point you need to keep hitting heavier weights. That also means you're looking at, again, lower rep ranges. You can either have straight sets, for example, sets of 3. You can have reverse pyramid style sets, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever. You can work to rep maxes if you feel like the athlete's, this trainee is ready for it. There's so many ways to do this. But a couple of key things that should be present are, 1, you should pretty much at this point, if not already, you should at this point, I want to take a break. Dude, this is actually a great example right here.
Yeah, buddy!
Keep going, the pads will catch you. Okay.
I feel like I'm doing a giant iron.
So if you haven't done this already, like actually going back, this is a great thing to start working on even earlier, like as soon as they start doing their controlled reps and tempos. But definitely once you start getting the max force, it's pretty much every rep, unless you have a specific reason not to, should have like constant attempted acceleration. Like you should be trying to accelerate every rep, no matter how heavy it is. So bench, squat, deadlift, shoulder press, you name it. Like as soon as you basically are turning that rep around and going through it, there should be a push to accelerate the whole way through. Because that is going to engage more muscle fibers. That is going to give you a greater chance for force output. That is going to help you work, like push through any like sticking points that may appear with a greater chance of success. And is a very important part of explosive power is that constant attempt to accelerate. Even if it's not actually moving fast, because I mean, we're talking right now about like heavy training. So even if the actual velocity is not high, you still get way more out of it if you're trying to accelerate through the movement. Again, it's totally cool to have reasons not to do it on purpose at specific times. But if that should be there, and the general default should be give me acceleration as you go through it. Another part of this is you can also start achieving supramaximal stuff, like so actually above your max, with either heavy eccentrics, so bringing eccentrics back and either using like heavy negatives, which is not really, that is not particularly suitable for like undeveloped. I would not do heavy eccentrics unless we would consider them more developed at this point. So first time through a full training cycle would not be considering heavy eccentrics. But that is an option, since again, like eccentrics themselves are going to be stronger than the normal rep. Basically the idea is, with the bench as an example, is you can at least resist a weight that's going to crush you more than easier than you can actually push the weight back up so it doesn't crush you. That's basically the way to look at it. But another way that you can do like super max past your max training is also using partials, partial movement. If you want to do range of motion all the time, that's good. But if you have actual reasons, whether it's a weak point, whether it's a specific motion in a sport, something like that we want to really make sure that we're focusing on, partials are a great time for that. So, that's a great time to use whether it's a board bench press, something like that, so they're only coming part of the way down, or like a higher box squat, or like a shorter step up actually, so they don't have to step as high at a greater range, something like that. So all sorts of ways you can do this to get like even higher force outputs through different angles. Yeah, page 1 is done. Page 3 is fake, it's blank. Okay, so once we've spent some time developing that, then we want to make that, then actual explosive power would be the main goal. Because now we're taking all that strength, everything, and just trying to get the highest power output that we can. It's acceleration, velocity, was still with a high amount of force. So realize that this is actually out of all of them probably has the broadest range in terms of performance, because it means so many different things in different sports. Things we want to look at is we want to choose the explosive angles. Like why does almost every performance athlete here, do some variation of Olympic lifts and or plyos and or, resisted sprints? Because explosive hips, explosive running, explosive jumping is present in almost every single one of their sports. So even though it's one of those funny things where okay, it looks like we're just doing these exercises because they're the explosive ones to do. And in a way, this is semantics, because that is what it is. So while it looks like it's not just that we're doing those exercises because we think they're the ones that should be done for power training. If we want to get technical about it, it's because those are the exercises that are actually working the explosive angles that we want the athletes to have. So we're not doing cleans just because we want people to do cleans. We're doing cleans because we want these athletes to be able to explode through their hips, through their knees, through their ankles in that direction. Does that make sense? Again, it's just a perspective. It's semantics. I just want to make sure that people have the perspective right. And not accidentally think this because I've seen that happen. Like there was actually when I was working at WVU, I eventually got rifle. There was a strength coach, I want to say 2 or 3 strength it was like 3. But several strength coaches before me, but on the same staff who worked with rifle, who could not let go of their personal belief that they should be doing hang cleans, power cleans, etc. because they were athletes and because it was a strength conditioning program. And rifle does not have explosive hips. Okay, so it's like this was not important, but he would not let that go. So I guess I say that because, like I said, it actually can happen. Like people just
if you had explosive hips on rifle, you miss.
Yeah, unless that's where you're shooting your bullets from.
Or maybe.
It's
From dusk till dawn.
Yeah, there we go. Yep. Okay. We also, we also want to choose. Hola. We also want to choose the speed strength. That speed dash strength is how that reads. So I'm going to start that over. Choose the speed strength, choose the peak power, or choose the strength speed that you feel like you want to train. So this is all up to you, just trying to make the athlete better. But those are all, so that is all one spectrum of things. And is different combinations of how it's actually used. So it's all one spectrum. The very top of that spectrum that is not mentioned there is maximum strength, maximum force. So everything there comes in reverse order underneath them. So max strength is like 100% 1 rep max. Not very many sports outside of powerlifting actually need max strength when they're competing. But let's say you're a lineman. That means you're competing against other linemen, which are other very large human beings. And they're pretty close to you when they start. So it's basically man versus man, who's stronger than the other. That is going down for max strength. That is a very high amount of strength speed, which is a high, the term that's first is the most important in these terms. So a very high amount of strength with some consideration with speed helping. That's alignment, is strength speed. And in fact, an offensive lineman is more strength speed, whereas a defensive lineman is a slightly lower combination of the two because they're the ones who need to be a little bit faster to work around it. Underneath that, we have peak power. Football's great because they have so many examples of this type of thing. Peak power would be like a linebacker, a safety, someone like that who needs to be like really strong for their job, but also very explosive and try to be fast. Speed strength is when we're starting to get to where like the speed is the most important part by itself, and the strength helps with the speed part. So if we stick with football, speed strength would be more of the receivers, the corners, the quarterback, and even the kicker. Those would be more speed strength guys. So this is all like, so think about and then speed at the end is like not just running speed, like speed agility training, but just high velocity with almost the strength, again, strength is the foundational quality. So the strength that you have definitely helps like how fast that speed can be. But otherwise after that, the speed just needs to focus strictly on velocity. Like, nobody really in like the sports that we're used to encompasses that more than a baseball pitcher, because it's literally, again, it's 5 ounces. It's how quickly can we go through this like super fast torque movement, drive through the body to get as much speed as possible through the stroke. So visualizing what all of these things mean is how you kind of like literally take like, okay, this is how I want these things to be moved. So this is how I want the exercises to be done. These are the exercises that I want them to do. So it is like that. Like, do you want them to be something they can accelerate against, but the acceleration is slow, but they're still pushing against that? That's more strength speed. Do you want it to be something lighter and have them move it as fast as possible, still accelerating? Like, band resistance, that's more speed strength. Do you want it to be more about just that like peak explosive power? Those are most of your cleans, your plyos. Do you want it to be just about the speed? Those are like different like light med ball throws or like straight sprint, etc. So the actual visual representation of all of these qualities is literally what you were looking for in the exercise to be made for it to be transferred over to the sport. And then always keep max strength up. Because again, you don't want that to go down. And honestly, it's my personal belief with zero research backing, blah, 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 that I've ever seen. It's my personal belief that athletes 20 and under should always be improving their strength and power, even in season. There's no reason that, especially like a high school athlete, shouldn't still be working to get stronger in season. That's a super outdated, dumb concept for when they don't do that. Okay, any questions on those? Just overall program as a whole. Cool. Okay. Now some more specific ones. So I got 3 of these. Agility. With agility, looking at what we're doing there. Again, this is all just starting from how do we build it up to what are we going to. We want to start with stable movements and range of motion. So you can see where so much of this comes back again to oh, cool. So really with AA in the early phases, we're already knocking that out by just focusing on good movements and good range of motion. So that's what we want first when it comes to agility. Like I was telling the interns who were with me yesterday for a while, what so many people do wrong is when they think of something like agility, they just instantly go to something and they want to see the athletes move full speed. To so many coaches, so many trainers, they're just thinking, oh, I want this to look like a workout. I want this to look like the athlete is giving me full effort. And they just go straight to full speed, disregarding everything that agility is actually supposed to do. So we want to start stable. So there's 2 paths here. Both of them start with stable movements, range of motion. So the basic one is gets from there, work on getting stronger, especially eccentrically. Because every time you do an explosive movement, that is an eccentric absorption. Because every time that you go to explode through and you're changing directions, whatever, your foot hits the ground, it's absorbing all of that pressure and that force of that step and then trying to push against it before it can push against it to actually create the movement. So when it comes to agility and injury prevention, stuff like that, we really want to make sure we have the eccentric hit. And from there, you're then working on more explosive power and start working on quicker stretch shortening cycles, aka the more explosive eccentrics. So your normal plyos or fast reps, things like that. So going to the actual exercise ones. So this is again coming from stable movements and range of motion. So we go from there to proper single movements and changes of direction. Hence, looking at it here, this is why a lot of the early stuff is in-out drills, or side shuffle, the turn and sprint. Again, those are a lot of my favorite early agility drills because it's just focusing on a single movement and getting them to change the direction. As that improves, we start wanting to see that in actual more full power, full speed single movement. And we also want to start seeing changes in speed because that's also a huge injury risk. That's when a lot of the injuries happen in sports is when people are changing speeds. So from there, we want to start moving to more predetermined changes in direction. So it's not just single movement now, but so multiple changes in direction, but still predetermined so they get a chance to work on it. So this would be W drills, cone drill, literally any change in direction drill, but where the athlete has that where they're going. And this is actually something that, honestly, we can start doing even more of. But from predetermined change in direction to then start doing more reactive predetermined change in direction. So what I mean by that reactive, but also pre-planned or predetermined, is they have options. They know what the options are, but they're gonna actually react to it. So this is where with Carly, she's had on some of her days T drills, so she knows when she's coming up to that T that she's going left, right, or backwards. But until she comes up and she gets the signal from the coach, she doesn't know which way she's going. So the key here is one of the things we're doing. So we basically started with like the power, the strength, and movement first. Then we start wanting to make the movement better. Now we're making the movement more real by them not quite knowing what they're doing. Because you'll get a more realistic change in direction from somebody who has to make a decision to move than somebody who already knows they're moving left. You know what I'm saying? Like one way when you get to pre-plan it, you're like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I want to do it right. That has to come first. But once they get that right, we want them to start make sure that they're getting reps in and doing it right when they're not quite sure which way they're going. Once they've done that, then we start going into more purely reactive stuff, which very rarely gets done here, because this would like purely reactive or even small-sided game situation. The closest thing like we do here would be like when we have athletes do mirror drills, because again, like in that case, it's just strictly moving with somebody else if they don't have anything else that they're going for.
Yeah.
So, are you enjoying walking in front of that camera?
I was in front. No, she's running, walking in front of it.
It's on this pointing this way.
I thought it was the other way around.
Let's say so going from moving that way agility wise. Speed wise. So okay, again, strength and power always make it better. Just forget that when it comes to like, hey, run faster. The stronger you are, the more explosive you get, that should help. So never forget that part. But then, so we want to start with the very start of like, think, okay, when I'm running, where do I actually start? You start with your foot hitting the ground and your knee driving. So that's why we start with foot strike mechanics to get more power out of it and form. Because if we can simply, that's why I like the foot thrusters. I like the foot thrusters honestly better than the wall drill. Wall drill is just like another way to work it. But the reason why we do those is because I really want the athletes, if we can just get them to, as soon as their foot hits the ground, to be able to get more power out of it, then almost no matter what else they'll do, they'll get their speed will improve. So foot strike mechanics for power and form. Then we have them working on their first step, so their actual speed, like the explosiveness that they get from the very first step. So things like the half kneeling starts, falling starts, etc. Those really help emphasize the stagger start, really just starting inside the first step to then like that to then starting speed. And then going like it just keeps building up from starting speed to then longer accelerations. That's also like, at that point we actually have enough movement, so to speak, where we also want them to start getting purposeful decelerations, because that's where a lot of the injuries happen, is decelerating. And again, anytime your foot hits and absorbs, that's an eccentric contraction. So we want to make sure that they're eccentrically prepared. And then eventually max acceleration, and at the same, not necessarily the same drill, but at similar times, as they get better, we also want to make their deceleration shorter. And eventually top speed. So top speed is it's similar to max strength in the way that like the actual top speed has the least amount, like you're almost never going to see it actually in there, but it helps the other things get better. And then last, not least, on this list of the specific stuff is kind of the framework for being explosive and also more injury resilient with plyos. So you keep hearing this one, strength and technique first. So we also want to make sure from there, we're then making sure we're doing, again, proper eccentric training so that the tendons and the muscles are prepared to take the pressure of explosive movement. From there, we want to go to rate of force development from multiple angles. So rate of force development, just fancy way of saying accelerate. Like keep trying to accelerate the whole way. But this is where multiple angles helps, especially when we're talking about explosiveness and plyos. So that's why it's not only squat jumps, it's not only broad jumps, which are then forward. It's not only unilateral stuff like step up blast offs or split squat jumps. We're getting different angles involved. Like a split squat, for example, or a split squat jump, it's not only about the fact that it's like a leg is, for example, you're like one leg is doing more work than the other. It's also the fact that now it's at an angle where the hip is flexed on one side, whereas it's overextended on the other side, and you're getting an explosive angle at something that more similarly is like more similar to running than a squat jump would be, for example. So the angles are an important thing to mix with. Like this is why personally I don't like programs that only have like one plyo per phase, which I see a lot of that like a high school level or stuff like that. Is they'll look strictly at like vertical power output, that this is what we need to do, and then their athletes are prepared in one angle, and that's it. So from there, we get to then explosive acceleration, and really focusing on launch points. All I mean by that point, really, the last one, is athletes should focus on that acceleration so much through an explosive exercise or an explosive plyometric that when they leave the ground should specifically be the point where they're moving their fastest. Like if you're doing again, just a squat jump, there's no reason whatsoever for anybody to actually slow down into the jump itself. They should be at their fastest point when they're leaving the ground. So that's what I mean. So they should really focus on accelerating quickly, that explosiveness of their acceleration, and actually launching off of that point at their highest possible speed at that one. It'd be like a throw again. Like we're not over here with pitchers trying to like slow the ball down as they're about to release it. That's the point of maximum speed is as they release it. So from there, we then go to also the ability to withstand higher and faster eccentrics. Basically, the previous one, the explosive acceleration, that's a concentric motion. And we already talked about making sure eccentrics are ready early on. Great. Go faster, Jesse. Okay, then I'm on the last two lines. Okay, so we started making sure that just eccentrically we were ready at low level. Then we were getting explosive concentrics with the explosive accelerations and launch points. Then, because this is like the one time it's flipped, because when it comes to like explosive actions, explosive plyometric sprinting, they're undergoing both higher force and high speed eccentrics. So we want to make sure that we're getting ready, like really ready for it. So then we look at the ability to actually withstand higher and faster eccentrics. So this would be like, make sure there's time, for example, for the athletes to do like drop downs off boxes or something like that. From there, moving to, just more intense, like stretch shortening cycles, whether like Vertimax, something like that, or just anything more intense like that. And kind of the last point of that would be the explosive impact, your more box jumps, especially like a single leg box jump. A single leg depth, drop to a box jump is way more impact than just twice of what double leg is. Like, so just building into the explosive impact stuff and also building into faster overspeed eccentrics. Again, that's like box drop-offs. That could also be weighted barbell squat jumps. There's extra force and you're coming down quickly. Can also be where it doesn't have to be a plyo. That's where like flywheel speed squats can come into play if you use the Kratos, or downhill sprints. Like that's another way to do like an overspeed eccentric and getting the body ready for it. Yeah. And so especially coming through that, when injuries happen, especially on explosive moments, they normally happen during deceleration. They normally happen during absorbing impact, and they normally happen very, very, very early on in the absorbing impact phase, like 150 milliseconds or less. Whereas, like a rep takes much longer than that. Even a fast rep takes longer than that. So we want to really get to the point with the explosive work where we're really getting them ready for high force in a very, very, very short amount of time absorbing wise, because that's the injury zone. So that's where people need to get ready for that.